Today we're talking about Article 5 of the Anglo-Irish Treaty, which looks at the Free State owing up to £150 million at the time to the British government, and when that was waived, abandoning Northern nationalists as a result. And we're also going to talk about bishops, Irish bishops in 1975, warming to sex in marriage. Article 5 of the Anglo-Irish Treaty is gradually usurping that place in public attention held at intervals by Article 12. Mr. Winston Churchill referred to the fifth article in his budget speech, though rather casually. Its existence was harped upon by several die-hard organs next day. Its provisions have been the subject of comment in various quarters within the past few weeks, though President W.T. Cosgrave said nothing about it in his recent exhaustive review of the Free State situation. He and his colleagues have not forgotten Article 5. The text of the article is: the Irish Free State shall assume liability for the service of the public debt of the United Kingdom as existing at the date hereof, December the 6th, 1921, and towards the payment of war pensions as existing at that date in such proportions as may be fair and equitable, having regard to any just claims on the part of Ireland by way of set-off or counterclaim, the amount of such sums being determined in default of agreement by the arbitration of one or more independent persons being citizens of the British Empire.
Being citizens of the British Empire. There's a phrase you don't hear every day. That was Cormac Moore, Dr. Cormac Moore, reading from the Irish News from May the 15th, 1925. Welcome to the Irish History Boys with me, Tim McGarry, and my very erudite colleague, Cormac Moore. Cormac, National Balances was the headline in the Irish News, May the 15th, 1925. We're talking about an article of the Anglo-Irish Treaty from 19...
That's not Article 12.
That's not Article 12.
But it's related.
You love a bit of Article 12, but we're going to diversify. We're going to go Article 5. And this is about do, re, mi and money. And this is the bit where people kind of forget that the Irish Free State basically agreed that when they came into being, that they would pay money back to the British government to pay for pensions and things like that, and they'd pay a proportion of the debt of the British Empire.
Yeah, so the public debt, of keeping the British Empire going. It's military, it's all its operations, and they agreed. It is.
Does that sound like a wise thing to do?
Well, apparently it was quite common. I think it still is common in international treaties, particularly when you're either dividing or uniting, or it does happen quite a bit. I don't know if it's wise. I'm not an international diplomat. I couldn't tell you but apparently it wasn't particularly controversial,
right?
At the time, but it could have meant now the last line, as I mentioned there was going to be arbitrators deciding.
Independent arbitrators who are citizens of the British Empire.
But citizens of the British Empire. So they were going to decide how much would the Irish Free State have to give to the British government, the British Empire, basically. And that hadn't been decided yet. So this, in 21 up to say 25 when this is waived. So this is actually waived as part of the agreement that basically keeps the border as it is. So basically this is the Irish Free State getting its coin and abandoning our Northern nationalists.
Right,
as seen by Northern nationalists.
To recap very slightly for people who may not be up to speed with the Boundary Commission and an excellent new book. Is it out now, Cormac?
It's out now, yeah.
It's out now. Oh, you can get it at all good bookshops and online. What's the name of your book?
The Root of All Evil,
with the
Irish Boundary Commission.
For those who are less than familiar with the Boundary Commission, Anglo-Irish Agreement 1921, Michael Collins and the British government agreed to set up the Irish Free State. Northern Ireland is in existence, but its final borders haven't been agreed. Yeah. As part of the Anglo-Irish Agreement of 1921, they say there'll be a boundary commission and they'll have a look at the line and find out where the final boundary would be. That didn't happen for various reasons until 1924-25. Mm-hmm. It reports in 1925. And
it's shelved. We don't see the report.
Nobody sees the report because basically there's no change to the border.
There's no change of border.
But this becomes relevant here, whereas Article 5 of the Anglo-Irish Treaty becomes relevant because the Free State are a bit skint, basically.
Putting it mildly, they're a bit skint, yeah. They've absolutely no money at all. And
plus, as well, sorry, some people might even remember, there was a civil war after the Anglo-Irish Treaty. So, Ireland, was skint to begin with, then has a civil war. So the economy is we can't say bad words because we're nice people, but the economy is effed.
Absolutely, yeah, complete. And this Article 5, like people are saying, you're talking about 150 to 160 million sterling that a free state would have owed back in 1920. So that's in the billions now in today's money, and with a country that had just been through civil war, had no money at all, and they were faced with the prospect of Winston Churchill, he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and he said, look, I've got a problem here. I can't just waive this for you because what do our taxpayers say? What do people in Britain say? You know, my voters say, and. They could basically waive £150 million, which was a lot of money for the British Empire as well.
And did they need? Sorry, did they have to? Technically, did the Free State have to pay that in one go?
No, that was impossible.
So it's going to be over a lot of years, but
50 years, whatever.
The national debt, and it's going to be a big drag on the economy. Right?
Like at the time, do you remember Germany had reparations as well? Like which I think they only finished paying those not so long ago when Angela Merkel was in power. So like these agreements, financial agreements, or whatever you want to call them, penalties. They go over decades and decades, but it still are a huge drain on the coffers of a state, particularly a state that's absolutely broke, what the Free State was. So that was what hanging over the Free State. Now, like Northern Ireland had a lot of debt as well, and was meant to contribute towards the empire too, and it manoeuvred its way quite successfully in not paying a lot of debt towards the empire after a while.
One thing that politicians in Northern Ireland is good at, it's screwing the money out of the Brits. We're very good at that.
So that was what happened.
Am I right though that it was James Craig who actually suggested to the Southern government, it was the Northern Ireland government suggesting to the Southern government, there's a way around this, why don't you ask the Brits for a few quid and we'll tag on behind or something? Is that a bit too?
But he does, and he says, look, I can help you there with dealing with the British. I've
friends there.
All right, I know how to deal with them. I know how to get money off or not pay money or whichever way you want to put it. And he did say that because it wouldn't have impacted on him at all. In fact, it could have benefited him because if the Free State was waived, having to pay big money, well, there's a great avenue for him to go, well, they got away with it, so maybe I can get away with it as well. So it meant he was not going to lose any political capital by Free State waiving money. But De Valera mentions as well, it becomes an issue like obviously the Irish News are mentioning it here in May 1925. This is when the Boundary Commission is deliberating, and this at the time is a separate issue. So the Boundary Commission is going to decide the borders of between North and South. But still, the Free State at this juncture in May 25 still has to pay this contribution to
just
British
to be
debt.
clear, 100 years ago, May 25, the Boundary Commission is meeting.
Yeah.
It's allegedly going to decide what it's going to decide what the last final border of between Northern Ireland and the Republic.
A settlement of the border question.
A lot of people are very worried about it. Unionists worry that large chunks of the north are going to go south. Nationalists hopeful of the same thing. The Boundary Commissioners are going round Northern Ireland taking. They're having meetings and holding
interviews. So they've got a lot of witness statements, and they're basically interviewing the people who wrote those witness statements. At this stage, I think they're in May. They're in Derry. This stage, Derry City, and
behind the scenes, however, most people don't really know is that there isn't going to be massive change at all because Owen McNeill and the other two commissioners have kind of decided that there aren't going to be large tracts of land going from one jurisdiction.
They probably Joseph R. Fisher, the Northern representative, who was appointed by the British government. He's in touch with Florence Reid. She's the wife of David Reid, the Ulster Union's MP, and so he's telling the Ulster Union's ranks at this stage you've nothing really to worry about. And you actually do notice in public speeches of different Ulster Unionist MPs and public representatives in the summer of 1925, they're a lot more relaxed about the border. They're not in a panicky mode. The siege mentality is gone. They're not as paranoid because they're being informed by, and you see his correspondence, Fisher's correspondence with Florence Reid. And he's going, look, we might lose a small bit, but we'll actually gain some land as well. The bits we lose, we'll probably want to lose them, like Crossmaglen or South Armagh. So it's actually going to work out beneficial for us.
I apologise to the listeners of Crossmaglen. Nobody wants to lose you, Crossmaglen. We love you.
Well, Joseph Fisher certainly didn't love Crossmaglen. He actually referred to it as Afghan territory. We don't want Afghan territory. He wanted Donegal instead. He would have been very happy to the north get Donegal and lose people that don't want to be with us, basically, from other areas. So anyway, he's
So sorry, there's a political thing happening, which is the boundary commission. Where's the final borders
and that's
Northern
at this
Ireland
stage it's totally separate to Article 5.
Yeah.
Article 5 has to be paid.
Article 5 then
Free
is kind
State
of
government.
in the news because people
Yeah.
are going, well, what the people are starting to go, the Irish Free State owe us millions and millions of pounds.
Yeah.
How's that going to actually happen? How are they going to afford it? How are the British people going to react if they don't get their 150 million pounds? Is that?
Yeah, exactly. So and it becomes more. You see it when I was researching the book on the Boundary Commission. You see it coming up more because as the months go by in 25, and De Valera mentioned it when Cormac. So the Boundary Commission, as you said, it's deliberating. The three commissioners meet, and they do agree in October 25 the parameters of what the border was going to be. Essentially a little bit of give and take both sides.
Right.
Not substantial changes. It's leaked to the Morning Post newspaper. And then there's this massive big outrage in particularly border areas of in Ireland. O'Macneil resigns from the commission. When it's found out that he actually agreed substantially to this award, he has to resign from the cabinet, the executive council as well. And W.T. Cosgrave rushes over to London.
He's the Taoiseach.
They
didn't have
president of
Taoiseach,
executive
sorry,
council.
president, right, okay.
Yeah. He rushes over to London to get the Boundary Commission report shelved. He doesn't. All along, he's been saying no territory from the Free State can go to the north.
Right.
That can't happen. Even though the commissioners were meeting people from the Free State who wanted to go into the north, they were taking submissions from them. So he was living in Cloud Cuckoo land, thinking that this couldn't happen. When he found out what was going to happen, he rushes over to London to get the Boundary Commission report.
That's politically unacceptable to hand back bits of the Free State to Northern Ireland. They didn't see this coming.
He didn't want his. He said he'd call them his people. He didn't want any of his people going to the north. So obviously nationalists from what was in the north were not his people, according to him. Whereas his people from Donegal, he didn't want to go over to or North Monaghan going to the Free State. And then De Valera actually starts commenting. So he was interned after the Civil War. He was interned in August 23. He's a year in Arbor Hill in Dublin. He gets out, and the North's a big issue, and he's in Sinn Féin at the time, still in Sinn Féin, the anti-treaty Sinn Féin, and he's not in the Dáil, so he doesn't. Sinn Féin do not take their seats in the Dáil, so Labour is the official opposition.
They don't take their seats in 1932.
No, he took them in 27.
Oh, right,
27, but he so that was as Fianna Fáil. So he founded Fianna Fáil a year after the Boundary Commission report was shelved. But he's commenting on this, and he's saying, well, look, you see, like Cosgrave's gone over to London, let's see how he fares with the financial questions and the 150 million that the Free State owes the British government, and the Free State government's aware that De Valera is approaching this subject of Article 5. He's actually saying this is a bigger issue almost because we're going to have.
Well, what's De Valera's view of it? You should tell the Brits to sort off.
That's what he does pretty much when he gets to the government. He there's a commitment to contribute towards land annuities and he refuses to send the money to Britain, and as a result, there's an economic war in the 30s. He's completely going away from the British Empire when he takes power. It's not more what De Valera does here because he's no power here in this scenario.
De Valera was anti-treaty Republican. Yeah. He lost the Civil War. The anti-treaty Republicans lost the Civil War.
But they're still very politically very powerful. Yeah. They did a lot better in the August 1923 election than people expected. They won 44 seats. And so they were still a very potent force and could cause a lot of problems for the Cumann na Gael Free State government. So they're aware of De Valera nipping at their toes, talking about his Article 5 when they go over to London. Now they want, and I think they're genuine in this. I'm particularly talking about Kevin O'Higgins here, who is Vice President of the Executive Council, Justice Minister of the Free State. He wants a good deal for nationalists. Now he accepts that the border's not going to change, but he'd like to see proportional representation brought back in. Right. Craig had removed that for local elections. Was going to do it for the elections to Stormont. For the 29 election. So he wanted the specials to be removed.
The B specials to
be removed. And he wanted better treatment, basically, of Catholics. And gerrymandering that was happening all over local authorities and all that in terms of, really skewing it towards unionists in terms of councils and a lot of other local bodies. They wanted, Catholics to be treated fairly, essentially. Craig wasn't having either. Craig was basically and the British government and Northern government, they're in a great position because once MacNeill had resigned, and had it looked on the face of it had agreed to this award. They could have said, "Well, we'll go with the award." Your representative went with it. So the Free State government,
the Irish government, they're coming to London with a pair of twos, like, and they can't even bluff with a pair of twos.
Yeah.
They have no power. What if they just go? We don't accept the Boundary Commission. Well, what do you? The British would go. Well, what are you going to do then? Go back to war? Like,
the Free State government are in a bind. Like MacNeill really, they were always going to not get much territory anyway. That was the wording of the Boundary Commission was so bad that it was always going to be unlikely to benefit them.
Right.
But the way MacNeill resigned and the way he had actually agreed in substance to what the award was going to be meant politically they couldn't even get a propaganda win. They'd lost everything basically going over to London. So their efforts to soften the pill, soften the blow basically is that that Catholics are treated better in the north, and that's a win.
Right.
But Craig's not. No, and he doesn't have to because he would have gone with the new border, or he would have kept the 6 counties.
Yep.
He was okay with either. He was happy with the way the new border would have been. He would have got some of Donegal, North Monaghan. He would have lost South Armagh. A bit of Tyrone, bit of Fermanagh. So he then it comes to Article 5.
Well, sorry, before we get to the British government, not have any influence over Craig and go. Why not give them PR and why not take B specials away and why not sort of.
And they do. They'll come to this again, because they do. But they can't really force Craig to do anything because Craig has basically he could just say, "Look, let's go to the Boundary Commission report. Go with the award," and he would have been in his rights to do that. So so he's in a good position, and they. And look, they're a lot of them are close with Craig still. The British government, like they're in a happy position anyway because they've always backed Ulster Unionists or the Boundary Commission, and
they just want the problem to go away, do they?
They want a problem to go away, but also make sure that Ulster Unionists are happy because, particularly in the Conservative Party, there would have been a lot of problems, backbench stories if Ulster Unions weren't happy with the results. So when Cosgrave goes over initially to London, he only speaks to the British government, and he says he doesn't want to get Craig involved in this. But Stanley Baldwin, who's the British Prime Minister, he said we have to involve Craig in this. So he has to have a say in this, and he can decide one way or the other, like to keep the border as it is, or actually have the award, the Boundary Commission award, accepted. So then there's a notion of, well, Craig's not going to move on improving the rights of Catholics in the north, but what about Article 5? Can we do something on waiving of that? And it was talk for a good, like this all these negotiations happened within a week of each other, from November 26th to December 3rd, and Churchill was Chancellor of Exchequer. He was really holding out and giving money or stopping money.
Yeah.
He wanted political agreement, and he kept on saying about getting United Ireland, beefing up the Council of Ireland. All of these things. Actually, one of the most...
Sorry, Winston Churchill wanted a United Ireland.
Well, he was saying it publicly, and I think he would have been, like, within the Empire, of course.
Yeah.
But he would have been okay with United Ireland within the Empire, but unrealistic from both Ulster Unionists and where Irish nationalism was at the time. But he didn't want to give money away, because just for the sake of it, and so he tried to get an agreement. Lord Salisbury, who was a very die-hard Conservative member of the cabinet, he actually suggests an ombudsman for the north. He actually suggests a Catholic ombudsman. So basically, and he suggests Joe Devlin, who we mentioned in the previous episodes, the constitutional nationalist MP, former one of the leaders of the Irish Party from West Belfast, that he would be the kind of an ombudsman for Catholics, look after Catholic rights. And Cosgrave doesn't want that, and Craig doesn't want it either. Cosgrave, when he hears there's a chance of waiving Article 5, and he keeps on talking about, we can't pay, you're asking us to if it's £150 million, for example, we have to pay £6 million a year from now, or £8 million a year, depending on what interest rate you give us. We can't afford that. We're bankrupt. You want to bankrupt this country? But once he hears there's a chance of waiving Article 5, Cosgrave, who had actually, in fairness to him, had sought to get good rights for Catholics and to be treated equally. But once he hears Article 5 is going to go, he just focuses on getting rid of Article 5. Because that saves the Free State a lot of money potentially, So
well, there's two ways of looking at that. There's one way which is some Irish nationalists in the north would go, well, Free State basically sold us down the river for a few quid.
Yeah.
And I just took a few, what does it take to sell out the 6 counties? They go over to the British and they give them a couple of million quid and they go away. The other way of looking at this is the survival of the Free State. You know, they go, this is a massive issue.
But there's another way of looking at it as well. And Craig and Carson, Edward Carson, who's in the House of Lords at the time, Craig first of all said, like, to the British government, you're not going to get a bob out of them anyway. Like,
Right.
You can't expect a government's almost bankrupt to give money.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. You know, what to the British government are going to force Ireland, the Irish Free State, to give £6 million a year when they've literally are swimming in debt? It was never going to happen. Craig is saying to the British government that you're not going to get a bob out of these guys. You use that term, the bob, and actually, and Carson says in House of Lords at the same time, like, what's the British government going to do if the Free State government doesn't pay up? Are they going to use the gunboats down the Liffey again, try to get the money? They've already surrendered. You know, they've lost the Customs House, they've lost Saudi. They're not going to get any money off them. So that was another way of thinking, that the Free State government really didn't have this debt hanging over them because they were never in a position to pay it anyway. So, you know, you could have said, yeah, we'll pay it whenever, and kind of leave it. But Cosgrave obviously did think there was a debt involved. You know, it did think that this was a good win to get that off their backs, I suppose, to not have to worry about it. But what was interesting as the negotiations intensified, and you've got Craig involved, you've got Cosgrave involved, and you've got Kevin O'Higgins involved. Now, Kevin O'Higgins, I think, comes out okay in this. Now, he's the most passionate advocate for the Free State. He really does perform very well in front of the British government, very articulate negotiator, way better than Cosgrave. Cosgrave, like, they see the fear in the whites in his eyes, Baldwin and Craig. O'Higgins was trying to convince Craig to at least reintroduce PR. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Cosgrave goes, I don't like PR myself. So he agrees with Craig to not increase PR. He doesn't like the idea of the Bombudsman. He doesn't like the idea of a beefed up Council of Ireland. And he wants basically Article 5 waived. He wants that got rid of. So so that's what happens basically. So he gets an agreement that the border remains as it is. Craig doesn't have to do anything about nationalist Catholic minority. And the Free State is waived of the Article 5, the public debt, basically.
We kind of sometimes forget about the timeline here. You know, this is only 4 years from Michael Collins is alive and negotiating this treaty, and Michael Collins and Arthur Griffith and all, they've gone. Yeah. The Irish Civil War has happened. The Boundary Commission we've packed a hell of a lot into a few years here, and this is the kind of the end game, isn't it, of the whole thing?
Yeah, this is like
this is the end game of Irish nationalism getting a modicum of freedom from the British government. This is the end of the liberation struggle, is it?
Well, I think that, you know, the decade of centenaries that was happened roughly from 10 years from 1912 2012 to 2023. I think it should have ended at the end of 2025.
You just wanted another 3 years work out of it, didn't you?
I'm not the only historian that would say that.
See, the 13 years of the centenaries doesn't work. A decade of centenaries, that's a good kind of byline. Come on.
The 13 years of it. But the end of 2025 or 1925 was pretty much the settlement. There was almost a permanency to it. Obviously, there's a lot of division in the north, and we know what happened 50 years later.
From 25 to 69, kind of, this is it. It's over. Yeah. It's done with.
Yeah, in terms of the north, the partition side of things, there's a settlement there. There's a permanence to it that had not existed before that. Yeah, that was it. And on the basis of that, and this is why Northern nationalists felt so abandoned, was because the Free State was trustees to them. You know, not just within Northern Ireland, but the South. The Irish government accepted, Free State government accepted they were trustees of the interests of Northern nationalists. And the British government as well accepted that they were trustees as well. And it just felt that they were abandoned for the sake of money, basically.
A few quid.
Yeah.
And they didn't care.
And there is very good justifiable reasons for thinking that, you know. Particularly Cosgrave's actions. He was focusing on getting rid of Article 5. And he didn't really want to hear about anything that would have potentially helped the situation for the Catholics in the north. O'Higgins tried until the end to get better rights, better facilities for Catholics in the north.
So, just while we have a quick break here, if you can get in touch with us at any time on WhatsApp or email, just let us know if you have any questions. We're on 07483 313 842, or drop us an email on irishhistoryboys@gmail.com, and you can criticise Cormac Moore's analysis of this, because he is slightly obsessed with it. So if you have anything where he's got wrong, please tell me. Email me. I want to know. I want to know if he's got anything wrong here. But it's still kind of, 100 years on, nationalists do feel, a lot of nationalists still feel that they're abandoned by the South, and that this has continued into right up to the present day, that a lot of, the Southerners don't really give a damn about the North.
Yeah, and look, nationalists had been feeling that way, for a few years before the Boundary Commission decision, but that was the final nail in the coffin, really. That was that really broke the link between Northern nationalists and the Free State government.
So at the time, Craig, who was Prime Minister of Northern Ireland, he's got the British government more or less in his pocket and on his side, completely on his side.
Yeah, oh, he does. Yeah,
Northern nationalists really have.
And for instance, the British government at this stage, they were under pressure in 24 when the Northern government wouldn't appoint their commissioner. And they constitutionally they had signed an agreement, an international agreement, a treaty. If the Boundary Commission didn't meet, well, then the Irish government could have been, could have said, well, we don't want to, look at other, we want to abandon other parts of the treaty, like the oath to the king and all.
Yeah.
So that was the danger for the British government in 24. But once the Boundary Commission was up and running, it could have just produced its report. It was stipulated to do so under the treaty. If it had produced its report, whatever decision was made, that was the decision.
That was final.
That was the decision. That's the way it was in the treaty. But the way it manoeuvred by late 25 with McNeill's handling of his role as commissioner and essentially looks like accepting the award of minimal transfer to the Free State and some transfer to the North from the Free State. The Free State government was in an awful bind. Now Cosgrave has to take the lion's share of the blame for that. He appointed McNeill after all. But then when they go over to London, they're really in a weak position. Like, they don't have a leg to stand on, and the British government knows this, and so does the Craig and the Northern government. So it's very easy negotiating for British and Northern Ireland government.
Well, this is 100 years ago, and you get the feeling that today, which a lot of people in Northern Ireland, both Protestants and Catholics, would go, nobody wants us. I mean, down south doesn't really care too much about Northern nationalists. The rest of the UK don't really know or care about Northern Ireland or of any real affinity to unionism, in the same way that they did 100 years ago when unionism was entrenched in the highest levels of the Conservative Party.
That's probably the big difference now, is that
politically they were very, very powerful.
Yeah, and there were actually genuine Ulster Unionist fans in the British government, and they were, like, James Craig had worked with the British government, and he was a government member up until he became Prime Minister.
Edward Carson was in the...
Edward Carson was touted as a Tory leader. And at this time, while all this is happening, he's having inviting Churchill and Balfour and Lord Birkenhead over to his house. They go over to Craig has a house near London as well, in Surrey or somewhere, and they go over to his house. So they're well connected with the British government. So they know the people. They're people, essentially.
Yeah.
Nationalists aren't, and nationalists want to leave the empire as well. Like, the Free State essentially wants to get as far away from the empire as possible. So naturally, why wouldn't they be more closely affiliated with Ulster Unions? And that's the way it was. So that was the real politic of it. But nationalists did not play their hands at all well, particularly the Free State government. Now, there's also, you could say, Northern nationalists as well. They were expecting too much from the Free State government, because the Free State government couldn't do half the things that they were looking for, and yet they kind of blamed them too much, I think, in some respects.
You think so?
I do, because the Free State government was not in a position to get end partition. Unless they wanted to go back to war, which was unlikely to get the results they wanted to. The wording of the treaty was where the big problems rose for the Boundary Commission. And Northern nationalists, most Northern nationalists didn't see a problem with that either at the time.
The wording of Article 12.
Yeah, that was the root of all the problems. The root of all evil, you could say.
No.
As James Craig said himself.
The root of all evil. Get yourself a good lawyer, always, before you sign anything.
Well, one of the British negotiators of the treaty, Tom Jones, he was David Lloyd George's a fellow Welshman as well. He was saying the worst people to draw up a treaty or even their own will are lawyers. they wouldn't know how to do it. So.
I'm a retired lawyer. It's okay. It's a long time ago. So just on the same day that this is happening in the Irish news, on this day, arrangements for sittings of Boundary Commission in Derry. The Boundary Commissioners will open their sittings in Derry on Thursday. The use of the Irish Society's premises in St Colum's Court has been obtained by the Commission, and evidence will be heard there. A large number of witnesses will be examined, including 80 unionists from Donegal, claiming the transfer of that county to Northern Ireland. So people kind of forget, yes, Donegal could have gone back into Northern Ireland, technically. Representations in the same sense are being made by Derry Corporation, the Derry Harbour Board, and there's also representation from the Irish Society. The claim for the inclusion of Derry in the Free State is to be put forward by nationalists. It's kind of... Part of that, these people were wasting their time. They didn't know. And obviously, we know what happened in 6 months. But this is a complete waste of time. You say it's kind of already been decided there isn't going to be large transfers of land. And then people are talking about, Article 5 and the money issues bubbling under.
Yeah.
And all these representations in Derry, stay at home.
Well, you even see that... So when the Boundary Commission first convened in November 1924... the three commissioners agreed between themselves that all of their proceedings would be strictly confidential, that they would not talk to anyone. And Cormac and Tim, the Free State Commissioner, he rigidly stuck to that, as did Feetham, the chairman, Richard Feetham. But Joseph R. Fisher was literally, he was talking, not just to Florence Reid, who I've mentioned before, the wife of David Reid, Ulster Union's MP. He was in touch with Robert Lynn, he was a Northern Whig editor. He was in touch with Wilfred Spender, who was basically head of the cabinet, the Northern cabinet, who becomes head of the civil service in 1925 of Northern Ireland. So they know exactly what they're doing, and they know what the parameters are. And Fisher and Feetham shared same concepts of what the Boundary Commission would do. So economic and geographic conditions would outweigh the wishes of the inhabitants more often than not. Northern Ireland must remain a very viable and almost the same entity as was at the start of the process. So in all of these kind of parameters that Feetham and Fisher agreed with, nationalists kept on focusing just on the wishes of the inhabitants. That was their strong point. They felt it has to be based on what people want. But they were given information on all those interviews in Derry or wherever it was in these border areas. They're talking about, more people want to be in the Free State here than in the North, therefore it should be. They didn't focus much on economics or geography. But that information was already available. They were given the Boundary Commission census figures that the Boundary Commission already had. Everyone knew the census figures and the election results from years gone by. So they should have focused on the other areas more so. But the Unionists obviously had a trump card. They had a guy on the inside. Now there's no evidence that he specifically told them this is the way you should focus your evidence. But it's very interesting that all the Unionist representation seem to focus more on the areas that Feetham's most interested in, whereas nationalists focus more on the wishes of inhabitants, which the figures were already there. Everyone had a good idea of what the figures were. Everyone knew that Newry had 75% Catholics. Yeah. So that wasn't going to be a deciding factor really for you to go on about that again. It's already known. Focus your argument on something else. But Unionists seem to focus more on economics and geographic concerns, and that seemed to resonate more with Feetham, at the time.
So there'll be more on the Boundary Commission this year.
A lot
the anniversary
more,
coming up to the end of the year. But sadly, you'll probably know how the story ends, because we're still in Northern Ireland, and Crossmaglen is part of the United Kingdom, and so is Londonderry, and will stay for, well, as long as we decide to. The people of Northern Ireland decide, isn't that right?
Exactly. Yes.
We don't know how long that could be. Could be forever. Who knows?
Who knows? We don't know when we're going to have a border poll.
And now for something completely different. May the 17th, 1975. There's a headline to conjure with in the Irish news. Bishops welcome the new approach to sexuality and marriage. Bishops welcome new approach. Yeah. This is about the Catholic Church in 1975. A positive and creative approach to sexuality and marriage forms the central theme of Love is for Life. The third part of Human Life is Sacred, the four-part pastoral letter of the Irish bishops, to be read at all masses tomorrow. This is a long time ago. 1975 is 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I was a child. But I remember the time. I do remember the days when they would the bishop said about sexuality and marriage would have been listened to and heard. Now, anybody, young people hearing that bishops lecturing people about sexuality and marriage, they've a cheek, haven't they? Given what we know about the child abuse scandal, which isn't happening for another 20 years, or it hasn't been revealed for another 20 years.
It hasn't been revealed because it's certainly happening at the time.
It's certainly happening. But this is the church in 1975 issuing, trying to modernise as well, and they're trying to keep up with what the kids are doing. But they haven't really cottoned on to the sexual revolution of the 1960s.
No, well, is that surprising?
No, it's not surprising.
Priests and bishops, but look, this was the Ireland of the time. Like I grew up in the 80s. I remember, the Catholic Church being almost the most powerful body in Ireland at the time, and it all changed when a certain bishop had an affair and got a woman pregnant. Basically,
that would be Bishop Eamon Casey,
and it just that kind of a snowball effect in the 90s, and then obviously you had all of the sex abuse scandals coming on foot of that, and it just changed everything. The whole infrastructure of the Catholic Church, the whole viewpoint. Now, obviously, some people have remained very devout Catholics, but it just changes its whole parameters of what Catholic Church was almost overnight in the 90s.
I was in Drogheda in 1979 when John Paul II came. I went to Drogheda to see him do his famous "On my knees, I beg you." Like the Polish accent there. Yeah,
it sounded a bit of like.
I thought I was.
It sounded like the Dermot Morgan song.
I was too Warsaw there when I should have been Krakow. But "On my knees, I beg you, turn away from the path of violence," which was quite a powerful message in 1979.
Yeah.
But the Catholic Church in Ireland at this stage, it's more or less at its height. And I mean, you got 1 million people go into mass in Phoenix Park.
That's my first memory. I was 3 at the time.
You were 3.
I remember my dad. He went to Phoenix Park. I'm from Laois, and I remember my dad, my brother, and my mother putting up the Vatican flag.
Yes, the Vatican flags were everywhere. Do you remember Dana singing "Totus"?
No, I was only 3.
Totally yours, totally. Look that up, ladies and gentlemen. It's Dana singing "Totus" to us to welcome the Pope.
Yeah, but I do remember. As a 3-year-old, seeing a guy with a pointy hat walking down these massive big steps, I remember that. I'm pretty sure it's my first memory. I was 3 at the time, but that was obviously massive. Pope Francis came. Decades later, the crowd was not 1 million. It was not 1 million in Phoenix Park. Yeah.
But they were at the height of the power. It was a major event, obviously, for Ireland. But the politicians were... Well, all politicians in Ireland of North Ireland... He wasn't allowed to come to Northern Ireland, of course. There was a lot of debate, if I remember, beforehand about...
Well, obviously, this is end of September.
This is September 79.
So then you had Narrow-Water, Warrenpoint, and you had Mountbatten, the month before that. Yeah. So, it was...
But there was a lot of debate about whether, even before that, if I remember, whether or not that he would be allowed to come north, and there was a debate about whether he could go to Armagh, because that would be kind of close enough to there'd be enough Catholics around there not to annoy too many Protestants.
But not only that, but the Armagh is the seat of the Catholic Church, the headquarters of the Catholic Church. That's where the primate of Ireland resides. So so obviously not going to Armagh shows you that it was a very tricky situation.
What's interesting about this is kind of it seems so dated, and it's talking about sexual morality within marriage and the sanctity of sex within marriage and stuff like that. And it just seems like these guys are out of touch even in 1975, never mind in 2025.
Well, we're reading obviously from today's lens.
Yeah, and of course sexual morality has changed completely.
Completely, but on the face of it, you're talking about guys who are celibate, giving advice on sexuality and marriage, and it just doesn't make sense. It never did really make sense, but that is the Ireland we lived in, and their advice was taken on board. People did not use contraceptions, in Ireland for many years because
contraception wasn't legalised in the south of Ireland until mid-80s.
No, it was late 70s. Charlie Haughey.
Sure.
Yeah. You can get a prescription from a doctor, basically.
You can get a prescription from a doctor. Was there not a referendum on?
No, not on contraception.
There was a referendum on divorce.
Yeah, in 90s. Yeah.
So this is one of the arguments that unionists used to make, which was that the South in particular was Catholic dominated. It was, and this is evidence that all the politicians down south, every single one of them would be kowtowing to the Pope, and that Paisley had his pomp in 1979 or around this period, 75 to 79. Paisley as traditional loudmouth, vociferous Paisley, saying, that's the sort of state you have down south, priest-ridden, kowtowing to the Vatican.
Yeah, and it was dominated by the Catholic Church in many ways. I grew up, we had to say the rosary every night. Easter, Easter should be a good holiday, but we'd go about 4 or 5 masses every Easter. It was.
You have Stations of the Cross.
Stations of the Cross, yeah.
All
14 Stations
that wasn't
of the Cross.
going to a lot of pubs, by the way, young people. That was going to a church.
So I'm from a rural part of County Laois, and he was it was a Catholic school, and the priest was he was a lovely man, Father Walsh, our priest, but that presence, that kind of connection between the school and the church was there, always there, and even when I was growing up, the moving statues was a big thing. I remember we would be looking at this. You could see the church from the school, and we in primary school, we'd be looking there with seeing any statues moving. All of these things were a big part of our lives. It was, and it just all changed. It all changed in the 90s.
The priests and the bishops said things, and people had to more or less obey. But when 79,
they had such power. The Catholic Church had such power in Ireland, and their voice mattered.
Yeah.
It mattered a lot, and they got the Late Show, for example, would regularly have members of the clergy, including Bishop Eamon Casey, on it. So, and Late Late Show, everyone listened. Well, there was no sex in Ireland before the Late Show, as Oliver J. Fanning, the TD famously said. But they were the mainstays. You had Fianna Fáil, the Catholic Church, and you had the Late Show, and that was kind of Ireland at the time, in my respect.
Before it got even darker. Eamon Casey was actually warm-up man for the Pope at Phoenix
He was a
Park.
very popular bishop.
And he was a very popular bishop. And there was another guy called Father Cleary.
Yeah, Michael Cleary.
Michael Cleary, who was a bit of a...
Was he involved in 79 as well?
He was warm-up to Eamon Casey. He was warm-up for the Pope. And Cleary was a bit of the singing Pope, and a bit of... Some people think Father Ted is kind of based...
priest.
It's dare say that the Father Ted was based on that kind of trendy priest.
Yeah. Well,
subsequently, of course, it turned out...
They're Morgan and Father Trendy as well, isn't he?
But Father Cleary then, it turned out, was having an affair with his housekeeper, Bishop Eamon Casey, who was very well liked and was some people thought fairly progressive. He was involved in trochra and development and all of that.
Yeah.
He then had revealed that he had a child by a woman,
Anne Murphy.
And people were shocked and appalled in the early 80s when these stories came out.
No, the 90s, early 90s.
Was it the early 90s?
Yeah, early 90s. Bishop Eamon, that story came out of Bishop Eamon Casey.
I thought it was earlier than that.
No, it's definitely early 90s. It all snowballed after that. And then you had Father Brendan Smith, that scandal.
Well, Father Brendan Smith, I'm afraid I know quite a bit about, because we did a drama about that. And Father Brendan Smith was 93, 94.
Yeah. Oh, it brought down a government.
Father Brendan Smith was kind of the first paedophile priest case that came to public prominence.
Yeah. But that wasn't long after Bishop Casey's fall. So Annie Murphy was on the Late Late Show, and Gay Moore didn't treat her that well, actually.
No, he treated her quite badly.
Yeah, that was the early 90s, but then it kind of snowballed after that, and then all the sexual abuse cases start coming out. Brendan Smith was the first prominent one, but then it was just case after case after case coming out, and its reputation was in the gutter basically by the early 2000s.
There's a very good book by a guy called Derek Scally. Derek's one of the best Catholics in the world.
I know the book.
It's kind of the history of the Catholic Church, where they're getting their power, and they weren't as powerful in Ireland until sort of the mid 19th century.
It was after the famine really that they started.
After the famine, I did a show on another TV program called the Long and the Short of It, where we discussed the Norman invasion of Ireland, and part of the reason for the Norman invasion of Ireland was that the Catholic Church, or the Church in Ireland, was a bit out of control and needed a bit of control from the Normans from the Vatican, what became the Vatican, and that kind of tradition went on. But the Irish Church was always slightly independent until sort of the mid 19th century, when it became very Vatican centric. It the Tuam or something? There was a big synod in Tuam where they became very, very powerful, and from then on, right up until 94, Brendan Smith effectively brought the Catholic Church down. Well, sorry, Brenton Smith was the kind of the first one that lifted the rock on what was happening in terms of child abuse, and the bishops who were allowing it to happen.
Well, Brendan Smith, like he was found out what he did in one parish, and he was sent to another parish. You know? And this has happened with a lot of priests, which is. And this goes right up to the Vatican, that there's knowledge of
so the hierarchy knew about it.
And they just closed their eyes to it. And not only that, they sent them elsewhere. Yeah, so it's no wonder that the Catholic Church lost all its power after those revelations.
Yeah. So historically, here we are in 1975, and they're talking about sex within marriage, and you shouldn't have sex with outside marriage, and contraception, divorce.
I love the way it says that the views about sexuality in modern society have changed radically, says the bishops, welcoming the openness and frequent honesty nowadays, compared with the often puritanical and even hypocritical attitudes of the last century. I still don't think they're open-minded about those
they haven't
issues
quite got it yet,
in
have they?
75.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, we are on WhatsApp and email. Send us a WhatsApp message or voice note to 07483 313 842, or drop us an email on irishhistoryboys@gmail.com. irishhistoryboys@gmail.com. Is that all to us for today?
I think so, yeah. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you next episode.